Helwani had brought up a piece yesterday. I was Ariel's guest yesterday, but I didn't see the show, right? I only came on for my segment. So my son had made an appearance in Ariel's show, and he had on this cool jacket. So my son thought the jacket was so cool, and he was wearing a tap-out shirt underneath the jacket, like an old school tap-out shirt. So he thought that you MMA fans, first off, would leave a comment about his cool jacket, but secondly, praise his old school tap-out shirt. Now, my son is 8. The shirt is on underneath the jacket. You can never see the shirt. The point is this. I went back to watch Ariel's show with my son before we read the comment section. Ariel had done a meaningful piece, and it had to do with crossing the line at press conferences. What is crossing the line? First off, and I'm talking about with words. I'm talking about getting in fights at press conferences. I'm talking about with words, things that you say that are so mean and or distasteful and or crude, fill in the blank, whatever it might be. If you cross the line, what should happen? Ariel's suggestion was the president, if he were president of the UFC, that he would pull those guys aside and say, hey, you went too far. And Ariel's reasoning for that is those guys would respect that. That could solve the problem. They would respect it enough that would be, so basically simple, basically slap on the wrist, but Ariel also, knowing the guys, knowing the mentality, having done interviews and speaks with them enough, he thought that would solve the problem, to let them know. I understood Ariel's point. I understood his point of identifying and saying, this is too far. I understood that part. I do not understand any of the rest. I mean, it would be difficult for me to tell you how colossally important it is that a president of the UFC does not tell anybody what to say. And that's pro wrestling, is what I'm getting at. If you tell somebody what they can't say, you're not telling them what they can say. If you tell them what you don't want them to say, you just told them what you do want them to say. That's pro wrestling. That's scripted. And that's where the problem comes in. I mean, that's where the problem comes in instantly. How do you have a heel? I mean, right? If you're so worried you're going to cross a line, and what if Ariel suggested of just pulling him aside and talking to him? What if that's not enough? What if you got to actually come up with a commission, and here's what can be said, and here's what can't, and we're going to be the word police? But what if you had that? So now you have a line. You have an official line. You have an official line because now it comes with a punishment. Why would you ever approach it? Why would I ever do anything that could cost me 10 grand, that could cost me a fight? Why would I ever do anything? So I'll just sit over here like the rest of them. I'll be as vanilla as the day is long. I'll give you nothing of interest whatsoever. But if I do talk, it's going to be all moonlight and canoes. It's going to be all choir boys and badge scouts, right? I mean, it's going to be one of those things. There's going to be nothing there to watch, and you're not ever going to have a heel. You're not ever going to have heat. You're not ever going to have an angle. If there is a line that somebody else is deciding, they're only going to decide it after the fact, and it comes with a consequence. Why would I ever even consider sticking my neck out there, right? It's one of those things where it becomes so important that there's none at all. None. And there's even been a discussion of, well, you can't use profanity. And that makes good sense to me. I would certainly understand that, because that would be a very light one. There's not very many places you can go where you can use profanity. I would understand that to a degree. But the specific example that we were talking about was Colby to Leon. And Colby never used a 4-letter word. So if that was your litmus test, Colby would have been around it. I mean, just by example. That, again, this is where the problems come. So I guess I want to bring that to you because maybe I'm personalizing it to another level. When I started the entertainment era, I was having a hard time getting licensed. I was having a very hard time getting licensed for things that I had said within interviews. And I had never cursed, ever. You guys have never heard me curse. And I was still having guys saying, that's unsportsmanlike. That actually got brought up. There was a letter. You guys might remember when the Culinary Union and Stations Casino were having some kind of a battle. So the Culinary Union brought that over to the UFC. and begin to flex with massive power, big coffers full of money, and they begin to flex and push and try to damage the UFC as a way of getting something else totally something else done in the hotel industry. You guys remember that? I kind of gave you a fast update. Well, they were the ones that came after me, so they had they very, very well written. Things that I had said them all. Things that I had said them all. But then they offered their interpretation. Xenophobic, homophobic, they had all these interpretations. And they had turned that in to the Massachusetts Athletic Commission. I was getting ready to fight out there. It was going to be a debut of a new network called FS1. It was the main event opposite Shogun Rua. And I had to have a hearing. I had to have a hearing to get a license. I was the only one. Because the Culinary Union had submitted a letter saying you should not license this guy because of things that he said. None of which had to do with profanity. None of which had to do with violence. Like if I would have said those things and we went over and we were operating under the system of the movie standard, I would have been a G-rated movie. There was no violence, no threats of violence, no innuendo, no sexual orientation whatsoever, and no profanity. So it would really matter who it is that's judging that and looking at that, which is what you don't want any. The checks and balances that we have now are perfect, which is the audience. You don't get anywhere in this sport without the audience. So if you turn on the audience and they don't want you, you won't be at the next press conference. If you're not at press conferences, you're not on main cards. It's as simple as that. If you're not on main cards, you're not fighting in main events, you can't get to a main event, you can't fight for a title. I mean, there is massive repercussions for your actions. Massive, built in. We do not then need an above barrier, and I feel that I've proved my point. But when I was on the phone with Massachusetts, getting ready to go into a main event, right? I mean, this is a very, very big deal in little Chael's life. There was a commissioner from Massachusetts, and he spoke up first. And I did not know which way the wind was going to blow on this. As silly and ridiculous as that would have been, I didn't know, right? And I'd already been through Nevada where there was a guy out there called Kaiser that didn't want to license me. Because what kind of example am I to kids? He said those words. A government official that oversees cage fighting asked that question. Nowhere within the bylaws was there a how does he look in front of kids. Like that wasn't anything within his scope of jurisdiction, but he still brought it up. But I thought, well, Nevada's the leader. That was their opinion. So little old Massachusetts, I can't remember a fight they've thrown in Massachusetts before. They're probably not going to be very well equipped for it. There's a gentleman that spoke up. I couldn't see him. This was all over the phone. And he went first and he said, this is ridiculous. And if we were to start regulating words, you would remove all trash talk. And if you remove trash talk, we don't have a business. And it was as simple as that. And he was spot on correct. But to this day, I'm very grateful that he went first because the rest of the room that sat there with dead air when it was their turn to talk, after this letter from the Culinary Union was read, they would have gone whichever way was popular. Because he spoke up first, they then fell into place. Boom, I had my license and off you go. I'm just sharing with you. It's not even a question. It's not even a maybe. There are checks and balances. They're very serious ones. Not only within the organization, but within the sponsorships and things around the organization that are already in place. You also don't want to crucify somebody who's out there just trying to entertain, trying to navigate, trying to get under their opponent's skin, like whatever the goal might be. You do want it authentic. You do want it real. You do not want it scripted. You do not want it scripted in the least. It's one of the most important reasons why the promoter cannot come to you and tell you what not to say, because that by virtue is telling you what to say, and now all of a sudden it's scripted. It's pro wrestling. And you don't ever really know what you're looking at. And that was one of my bigger surprises when Ariel took the stance that he did. Now, Ariel was very light on it. He wasn't about suspending and fining guys. He wasn't talking about like a code of conduct. You know, it was a slap on the wrist, pull him aside and talk to him. I understand that, but you must know, right? I mean, where is that going to end? Eventually the guy's going to, okay, here's what you told me not to say. And then you're going to turn, you're going to say to the decision maker, well, is it okay if I say this? The decision maker's going to think about it for a second and go, yeah, you can say that. Then the guy's going to go out and say that, get lambasted and go, he told me I could say it. And all of a sudden you're right back into scripted pro wrestling. There's times where the promoter will tell you what he thinks. When you ever see the promoter's face on screen talking about the fight, that's him telling you what he thinks. When he brings the actual principles, that's when we're going to hear from them. Which is why it's important you don't have a third party that's overseeing that. And when I told you that I was surprised, I'm surprised because you don't ever know what it is you're looking at. Ever. Sean Strickland and Duplessis were in a fight that was captured and seen by the world. But an expert in Sean Strickland and an expert in Duplessis and one of the great physicality minds alive today is named Robert Whitaker. And Robert Whitaker said it was staged. He said they were not fighting. Fighting would involve an aggression and an anger towards each other. They were cooperating. That was planned. It was staged. And then he broke down why he thought that. It had to do with the angle that Strickland entered. It had to do with the fact that Strickland was hitting him with forearms as opposed to fists. This was Whitaker's breakdown. This isn't Chael's breakdown. But what I'm sharing with you, while Whitaker is not correct in this situation, what I am sharing with you, you don't know what you're looking at. And you don't know when a guy is working, and you don't know when a guy is shooting. You don't know when a guy's got a little script in his head that worked every single time, and he came out and he said one word different. He remembered it wrong. He doesn't have cue cards. He doesn't get redos and second takes. He doesn't have an earpiece in. You don't know what his intention was. So you let them go out, you let them perform, you let them build a business the way they want to build it. And if you want to hate them for it, you don't know if they wanted you to hate them for it. You don't know. You were just there to be entertained. If it turns violent, we're having a completely different conversation. If it sticks with words, it's a press conference. They're only words. I don't touch you and you don't touch me. I use my words to hurt you and you use your words to hurt me. Or you use your words to entertain the audience. Or you use the words to create humor. Or use the words to gain sympathy. Or you use the words to be pathetic and boring. Like, you can do whatever you want. It's your moment. If the moment is good, you'll be brought back and get more of these moments. That's the reward. If your moments are bad, you won't be invited back. That is your punishment. And if you believe anything else, if you believe that those are not planned and designed for very specific things, then you are a mark.